Welcome to my channel Sci-Fi Love Story. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. The summons arrived while Elia's ward was wedged upside down inside a maintenance shaft that had not been opened since before the station had a name. The shaft was narrow, dusty, and smelled like overheated metal. One of the lights flickered weakly, as if it had given up trying to impress anyone. Elia's had one arm buried inside an open panel and the other hooked around a support bar to keep himself from drifting. The pressure regulator in front of him was humming in a way that made his teeth itch. "That's not a happy sound," Elias muttered. He adjusted a coupling and tapped the housing twice with a spanner. The hum dropped into a smoother tone. The vibration settled. "There," he said. "You're fine, dramatic but fine." The station lights suddenly shifted color. Not red, not yellow. Deep blue. Authority lighting. Elias froze. Only 3 things triggered blue lighting on an imperial station: coronations, funerals, and summons from someone powerful enough that saying no was not considered an option. Slowly, he pulled himself out of the shaft and dropped onto the deck. He wiped grease from his hands onto his jacket just as the access hatch behind him slid open. 2 Imperial guards stepped inside. They were tall, slender, and wrapped in polished armor that reflected the light so cleanly it made Elias feel underdressed just standing near them. Their helmets hid their faces, but their posture carried quiet confidence. These were not soldiers sent to fight. These were soldiers sent to collect. One of them spoke. Elias Ward. The way the name was said made it feel heavier than it should have been. Elias glanced over his shoulder, half expecting another Elias Ward to be hiding among the pipes. "Unless you're looking for someone richer or more important," he said, pointing at his own chest, "that's me." The guards did not react. The one on the right produced a small data seal. It hovered in the air between them, glowing with layered symbols that shifted too slowly for comfort. "By order of Her Imperial Continuity," the guard said, "you are to accompany us immediately." Elias stared at the seal. Then he looked back at the open maintenance shaft. "I just stabilized a regulator that was about to rupture," he said. "If it destabilizes again." "It will not," the guard replied. "You fixed it." Elias paused. That was specific. He sighed, clipped his spanner back onto his belt, and nodded. "All right, but if the station explodes, that's on you." The guards turned without another word. Elias followed. The palace wing of the station felt like a different universe stitched onto the same hull. The floors were smooth enough to reflect his boots. The air smelled clean in a way that felt deliberate, like it had never been allowed to carry dust. The walls curved gently, guiding movement without ever seeming to block it. Elias felt like a loose tool inside a display case. As they walked, security fields activated ahead of them, blooming open just before they reached each threshold. Elias noticed the timing. The station reacted to him almost before he arrived. That made his neck itch. They stopped before a tall sealed door, marked with symbols so old, the translation overlay hesitated. The door opened silently. Inside, the chamber was dim and wide, dominated by a single viewport that looked out into open space. Stars drifted beyond the glass, distant and calm. A figure stood near the viewport with her back to them. She was tall, poised, and still. "Your Majesty," one guard said. The woman inhaled slowly. "Leave us." The guards withdrew at once. The door sealed behind them with a soft, final sound. Elias swallowed. He had seen the Empress before on broadcasts, ceremonies, and distant inspections. Up close, she looked almost human. Almost. Her ears curved back through her dark hair in long, elegant arcs. Her skin carried a faint silver undertone that caught the light differently. She wore no crown, no heavy ornamentation, just simple formal attire that somehow made her presence stronger. She turned. Her eyes met Elia's, and something shifted. Not surprise, not recognition, something deeper. She stepped toward a console and activated it. A holographic display unfolded between them, layered with data, genetic structures, and historical markers. At the center of it all was one name: Elias Ward. Bright, undeniable. Elias frowned. "Okay," he said carefully. "Either this is a mistake or I'm about to be blamed for something very expensive." The Empress studied him like a puzzle that refused to stay solved. "State your place of birth," she said. Elias blinked. "Dock Habitat 12, Outer Ring, cheap rent." "Your parents?" "Dead," he replied quietly, which usually makes this part uncomfortable. Her eyes flicked just slightly. She asked about his medical records, childhood anomalies, unusual metabolic markers. Elias answered casually at first, joking about doctors who charged too much to explain nothing. Then he noticed her hands. They were clenched tightly at her sides. That's when the humor faded. "Why am I here?" he asked. She hesitated, then spoke. "Because your genetic signature matches a ruling bloodline erased from our history over 6 centuries ago." The words landed softly. Their meaning did not. Elias laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was impossible. "That's great," he said. "Does it also explain why I break machines by looking at them?" She did not smile. The display shifted, lineage maps unfolded, lost colony data, sealed succession codes. "You are not a descendant," she said quietly. "You are a continuation." Silence filled the chamber. Outside the viewport, stars drifted on, indifferent. Elias stared at the projection, then at her. Then he rubbed his face, leaving a smear of grease across his cheek. "No," he said simply, "that's not how people like me exist." She turned away, facing the stars. The colony ship carrying that bloodline vanished during a civil fracture, meant to preserve the Empire, she said. They were erased to prevent collapse. Elias crossed his arms. "Sounds healthy." "You were never meant to be found." "That tracks." She faced him again. "The Empire does not need another ruler," she said, "but it cannot ignore you." That was when Elias understood. This wasn't about power. It was about control. And humans, he knew, were very bad at being controlled. He was placed under protection, which meant comfortable rooms, polite restrictions, and invisible walls. Elias explored anyway. He found maintenance corridors the palace had forgotten, old engine spines that still hummed with honest purpose, machines that didn't care about bloodlines. The Empress, Myral, began meeting him without ceremony. They talked about systems, about history, about how empires broke when they forgot why they were built. "You don't act like someone who wants a throne," she said once. "I don't trust furniture that outlives people," Elias replied. She laughed despite herself. But pressure mounted. Advisors whispered, factions maneuvered, data requests flooded sealed archives. One night an alert rippled through the palace network, not an attack, a confirmation. The lost colony was real. And so was he. Myral stood beside him as the report finished compiling. "The Empire will fracture," she said. Elias nodded, then it was already broken. She looked at him sharply. Humans, she realized, didn't inherit authority. They questioned it. And that terrified empires. The Empire did not react all at once. That, Elias Ward would later decide, was the most dangerous part. There was no explosion of panic, no fleets scrambling, no angry broadcasts. Instead, the systems adjusted quietly. Data flowed into sealed channels. Advisors requested meetings that sounded polite but felt urgent. Security protocols updated themselves with careful precision. The palace became very quiet. Elias noticed it first in the way people moved. Staff stepped aside faster. Guards watched him with the careful attention reserved for unstable machinery. No one was rude. No one was friendly. Everyone was alert. He hated it. "They're thinking too hard," he said to Myril as they walked through an internal corridor lined with adaptive shielding. "That's how things break." Myril did not disagree. "They are afraid," she said, "not of you personally, of what you represent." "Which is?" Elias asked. She glanced at him, an answer that history did not plan for. That made him snort. History shouldn't plan anything. It's bad at maintenance. Despite herself, she smiled. The smile faded quickly. Requests had begun to arrive from across the empire. Not demands. Not yet. Requests framed as academic interest, historical curiosity, or legal necessity. They all wanted access to Elias' genetic profile, to his records, to him. Elias called them what they were. "Ownership claims," he said. Myril did not correct him. Instead, she brought him into a chamber that had not been used in generations. It was neither a throne room nor a command center, but something older and quieter. The walls were unadorned. The lighting was soft. The air felt neutral, like it was meant to calm people who disagreed violently. "This room was designed for decisions," Myril said, "not performances." "I approve," Elias replied. "Performances get people killed." A small group of advisors waited inside. Their expressions ranged from tightly controlled calm to poorly hidden concern. They all looked at Elias as if he were a live system under stress. The discussion began without him. They spoke of continuity, of ancient law, of precedent and interpretation, of how revealing Elias too openly could fracture loyalty and hiding him could fracture trust. Words moved around him like weather. Eventually, Elias cleared his throat. "Am I allowed to talk?" he asked, "or am I still theoretical?" The room went still. Myril nodded once. "Speak." Elias folded his arms. "You're treating this like a symbolic failure," he said. "It's not. It's a systems failure. You built something so rigid that when reality didn't match the design, you erased reality instead of fixing the design." Several advisors stiffened. "That colony didn't die," Elias continued. "It adapted. So did I. You can't pretend that didn't happen just because it's inconvenient." One advisor spoke carefully. "And what would you suggest?" Elias shrugged. "Stop trying to own the past. Document it. Learn from it. Patch the system instead of restarting it." Silence followed. Not rejection. Consideration. That frightened Elias more than anger would have. When the meeting ended, no decision had been announced. That too was intentional. Delay was a weapon. That night, Elias returned to the engine decks. No guards followed him openly, but he could feel the station watching. Sensors tracked his movement. Security fields adjusted subtly. The station knew him now. He liked that. The gravitic stabilizer he had left unfinished greeted him with a familiar hum. Elias smiled and got to work. Machines did not lie. They did not care about bloodlines. They only cared whether you understood them. Hours passed. When he finished, the stabilizer purred like a satisfied animal. "Good," Elias said softly. "We're still friends." Footsteps approached. Myril stood at the edge of the deck, no guards visible. She watched him quietly, her expression unreadable. "You should not be here alone," she said. "Neither should you," he replied, "yet here we are." She stepped closer, studying the stabilizer. "You fixed it." "It was just misaligned," he said. "Nothing dramatic." She nodded slowly. "That seems to be your specialty." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the station breathe. Finally, Myril spoke. "They want me to present you." Elias did not look surprised. "As what?" She hesitated. "An heir, a correction, a threat. They cannot agree." "And you?" he asked. "I want the Empire to survive," she said honestly, "but not at the cost of becoming something brittle." Elias wiped his hands on a rag. "Then don't make me a symbol," he said. "Symbols break people, make me a record." She looked at him sharply. "A living archive," he continued. "Proof that the system changed and survived. Not something to worship, something to learn from." Myral considered that for a long moment. "You would refuse power," she said. "I don't refuse responsibility," Elias replied. "I refuse pretending power solves things by itself." That night, the announcement was prepared. There was no ceremony, no broadcast music, no dramatic lighting shifts. The Empire received the information as a formal notice through official channels. A lost colony had survived. Its bloodline had adapted. One individual carried verified markers of ancient authority, but would not claim a throne. Elias Ward was introduced not as a ruler, but as a living historical record, protected under imperial law, free from succession claims. Reactions varied. Some worlds were angry, some relieved, some confused. But there was no immediate fracture. That mattered. Committees formed, then reformed, then dissolved under the weight of caution. Ancient laws were not abolished. They were rewritten carefully, threaded into modern governance like old code adapted to new systems. Elias watched it happen with the detached interest of an engineer, observing a structure flex without collapsing. Weeks passed. Life settled into a strange new normal. Elias worked, mostly on the engine decks, sometimes on station infrastructure that had been ignored because it was historically sensitive. He fixed those too. Myral visited often, not as Empress, as herself. They talked about everything except destiny. About her childhood training, about his early years fixing broken things because no one else wanted to, about how leadership often meant choosing which mistake you could live with. One evening, standing by a viewport overlooking the station's maintenance spine, Myral asked him a question quietly. "Do you resent me?" Elias thought about it seriously. "No," he said. "Resentment needs intent. This feels more like a shared error." She nodded, accepting that. The Empire continued to adapt. The lost colony was formally restored to history, not as a tragedy but as an origin point. Educational networks updated their records. Young citizens learned that continuity sometimes meant change, not control. Elias became something unexpected. A reference. When debates grew heated, someone would ask, "What does the human say?" Elias hated that phrase. But he used the position anyway. He asked questions others avoided: why systems existed, who they served, what happened when people forgot how to fix them. Slowly, the Empire grew less brittle. Not kinder, just more flexible. One day, Myral found Elias in a service bay, elbow-deep in a power conduit. "You could have people do that," she said. He didn't look up. "They do it carefully, that would miss the point." She watched him for a moment. "The advisors want to know your long-term intentions," she said. He sighed. "I was afraid of that." "And?" she asked. "I want to stay," he said. "Not because blood says so, because choice finally does." She smiled, unguarded. "I hoped you would say that," she admitted. They did not make promises. They did not need to. The Empire did not gain a king. It gained a problem solver. A conscience with grease under his fingernails. Months later, Elias stood again beneath the same maintenance shaft where the summons had first reached him. The lights flickered the same tired way. The station hummed around him, familiar and alive. He smiled. People passed by and nodded, some with respect, some with relief. None with fear. That mattered most. At the end of the shift, Myral waited for him at the corridor's edge. No crown, no guards. Just a woman with long ears and steady eyes. For someone descended from ancient rulers, Elias said, I turned out very normal. She walked beside him. Normal, she replied, seems revolutionary enough. They moved on together, the station alive around them, systems adjusting, history continuing. Not because it had to, but because someone had finally bothered to fix it. The end.